If you are enjoying this podcast and other podcasts on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network, be sure to check out the Dragon Wagon Shop. Awesome t-shirts and mugs from your favorite shows so you can tout your podcast pride all while supporting your favorite podcast network. And make sure to check it often for new items and limited time designs. Shop now at dragonwagonradio.com/shop and get your dragon swag on.
Welcome back to another episode of The Hell With This. I'm your only host this week, Chad Peter. Mark is dead. I've killed him. I buried him in the floorboards. That seems to be a theme today. I've been talking a lot about this. I don't know why. I'm in New York. I've been here for a while. Just recorded with Mark last week. Shayna wasn't here for that. Shayna's our guest this week. She's a good filmmaker friend of mine. She's been... when did we meet? 2006. We were talking about this earlier.
We met in 2006.
2006, I was DPing a short film that you were acting in with our good friends Devin Reed, Ryan Jordan, and Amy Oliveira. Or Amy James.
Amy James.
Now they've changed their name to James because they
Amy
didn't
and
wanna,
Devin James, shout out.
They didn't want to take the last name.
That's a whole other story.
We won't go into that
That's
one.
A whole
There's a
story.
whole thing behind that one. But Shayna, you had contacted me about a couple months ago about maybe getting together. And while I was out here, I was looking for things to do. Back when I didn't know what my schedule would be, and now that I know it's insane. But before, I was like, hey, did I say this to you? Like, let's make something while I'm there. Or come visit, because I know you're a theater nerd. You've always been a theater nerd.
I'm a theater nerd.
But you've never been in New York that I've seen personally.
I've been in New York quite a few times, but the two of us have never been in New York at the same time. So no, you didn't say, hey, let's film something, let's work on something. You were like, come to New York and let's hang out. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And so we saw a Broadway show, but I wrote a short film and I was like, hey, Chad, you should direct this and let's shoot it in your apartment. I kind of threw it on your lap and was hoping you would say yes, even though you're working like 18-hour days right now.
And we just did a table read for it today, but at the same time, we're hoping it can still happen. But
yes.
Knowing my schedule, who knows?
It's going to happen.
Right.
That's how you make indie films. You force it to happen.
Force it to happen. It's like,
yes.
Is there anything else going on in life? Sure. Let's throw more on there. But
yeah,
ultimately, you're right. That's the only way you get things done. But last night we went and saw Burn This, which is one of your favorite plays. I'd never heard of it before.
Yes, Burn This by Lanford Wilson. I hope I have this correct. If I don't, I'm going to sound really stupid. Originally, it was with John Malkovich and I think Joan Allen. And last night it was with Kerry Russell and Adam Driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two of our favorite actors.
Amazing actors. It was, and this is a fun part of what happened. So we get these tickets, and I'm thinking we're like maybe 10 rows back, and we get there, and we are straight up front row. Adam Driver was literally hovering over me, and I was trying like not trying not to fangirl out, but that was crazy.
Not only literally, but the stage actually goes
came up to
out,
our noses.
It goes out over your lap.
Yeah.
It's extended out over our lap, and Adam Driver's at one point, he's like on all fours, face to face with Shayna, like screaming. He's like yelling.
One of the best moments of my life.
I can feel you vibrating in your chair. Like.
It was a treat. It was I don't think there's mistakes in life. I think Chad and I have talked about this before. Like I'm a big believer in like destiny and things happen for a reason. I don't believe in randomness, but I feel like that was like some sort of cool gift to be able to be front row at that play, which I have burned this.
Have you been to any plays in New York before?
I have been, but I don't know if I absolutely have been. I just don't know if the experiences will are as memorable as that one. You know, one of my favorite plays, when you told me, oh, I want to go see the show, it's in New York, and you said it's Burn This, I have a copy of that play on my nightstand, literally. And I didn't know Adam Driver and Kerry Russell were doing it.
Light reading material.
Yeah, a little bit.
No wonder you suffer from insomnia if that's the play, because it's very intense.
I've always been intense since I was a child. But yeah, it was definitely, I mean, if any creatives or actor friends are listening to this, I recommend that show, because I can't, like, I read a review that said Adam Driver was volcanic in his performance, and he is. Like, he
just bursts in. Like, the
rock
play
your
starts
world.
off without him for like almost 20 minutes.
At least 20 minutes. But he's a force to be reckoned with. It's not supposed
We
to be.
kind of talked about this last night. Like, I feel like he is maybe our greatest living actor of his generation.
I would say he's one of the most distinguished, and
Really? I mean,
There's
just
no-
because of his background, like.
it's just
what?
because he there's no one I would compare him to. I'm not like, oh, this other actor reminds me of Adam Driver, or Adam Driver kind of reminds me of so and so. He's his own thing, and you know, being a fan of the show Girls, I remember watching the pilot episode and seeing him and thinking, who is this? Like,
Right.
he's so different. And then finding out he went to Juilliard, and it didn't surprise me that he's outstanding. It's hard for me to put it into words, but he has a way of speaking that, this is going to sound so dorky, but I'm going to say it. I almost said it today at our table read, but then I censored myself. It's sort of his acting and his tone and delivery almost reminds me of like when someone would hear Eminem rap for the first time and they're like, what the? It's unlike anything you've heard. And it's hard to define it or even discuss it, but you're just like, this is really something, and it can't be taught. It's just who he is.
You're right. That is dorky.
But it's the truth, though. Like, it's just like when you just don't expect that.
Right.
That's how I feel watching Adam Driver perform. It's like if you hear Eminem rap, you're like, what? Like, when people didn't know who he was, he blew people away. Like, where did this come from? And that's the feeling when I watch him either on, Girls or anything else, or on stage. I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with. And Kerry Russell, I've loved her since Felicity, and I know you said you watch her on The Americans, and she's wonderful too. She's super vulnerable, and it's an interesting dynamic because she tells her character Anna tells Pale she's afraid of him, and it makes sense because he's got an intimidating presence, but he's super vulnerable. I don't know. I think it was a really great experience, a great Broadway show to come in and see that. And they did a great job too with the costumes and the 1980s era, and the actor who played Larry was also awesome. I don't have my program with me.
Sorry, did you say this was the first play you've seen in New York? Or
It's not. No. I've seen other plays here too.
Okay.
You know what? And I actually was reading about Kerry Russell in the program. They said she did an off-Broadway Neil LaBute play, like in 2005.
Which one?
I think it was Fat Pig.
Fat Pig. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's an author that, because I think you were doing Shape of Things when I met you.
Probably. It was probably Amy's stage
that's-
manager.
I love that. Mark, our usual co-host, he hates it. Like, he cannot stand that writing. Like, he hates it so much.
It's brutal.
Because it's
He's
brutal, and
really-
I can't wait to do that movie with Mark. I don't know if he's ever going to do it with me, but
Do what movie? Shape of Things?
Shape of Things.
You're going to do that movie?
Well, for the podcast,
Oh, to watch the movie. I thought you meant film that movie as a director. I was like, really?
No. It's already been done.
Yeah.
LaBute
Yeah.
did it himself.
He's kind of like it reminds me of David Mamet. He's like, it's tough material to swallow. It's brutal. And it's always about, it seems to me like always someone's being emotionally abused in all his material.
Or manipulated. Yeah.
Or manipulated. And you know what? I think, is Neil LaBute from Michigan? He might be.
Maybe.
I don't know. That's random, but I think it might be. So
Shayna's from Michigan, if no one's picked up on that yet. Between the M&M drops and...
Yeah. Well, I'm always interested in like what comes out of people who are from there, like, and what, like, what kind of. I know Adam Driver. He's from Indiana. I think he's from Indiana.
Well, I'm glad that you're here because I don't think we've ever really had anybody to talk about like theater or not the basics of acting, but I've always told you this, that I've always felt like you are one of the best directors I know as far as dealing specifically with actors.
Thank you. I don't know if you've ever said that. That
I
was
have,
really
I have
nice.
to. Well, I've always thought it.
Oh,
Even
thank
if
you.
I've never said it, you can't read my mind.
I should. Be
But I've
able to
always
do that.
I've always trusted your vision of how actors should go through their process and it's funny because we've talked about this a lot. Like my background's very technical, and I think a lot of directors, especially in film and TV, they all struggle with that because that's usually where they come from. I think TV directors might have more background in theater than film and movie directors, but as far as like my background, very technical, but yours is you came up from the theater and you were directing some plays, and then only not too recently now you kind of transfer that over into film, and now you've been directing films. You did your own short film, and now you're working on some other short films. You wrote this one.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that we were talking about this. I feel like this has been kind of like a subject that's been coming up a lot the last few days, is that like in the filmmaking industry, no one knows what they're doing until they do. Like you just learn. I'm a person that learns by doing. Like I have to do it. It has to get into my muscle memory. And it's always an intimidating field to break into. And sometimes, like today is a perfect example. Like I wrote this first draft of a short film, and I cast these two actors that I admire, Marielle and Matt. And, there's all those, voices in your head that are like, oh, maybe it's not good enough, or maybe the writing isn't good enough. And, but I've learned to kind of manage myself and just say, you have to just jump and just do things and just try things. And if it works out, awesome. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So in terms of talking about being a person coming from theater, I met you, I was acting on a set for my senior project, and it was a scene from Cowboy Mouth, that Sam Shepard play. It was pure theater at that point. I was 22.
Very theatrical, yes.
Yeah, I was 22. I don't think I had done maybe one indie film, and Chad had this huge camera, and I remember thinking, I had never met him before, and I was like, okay, I feel like a dinosaur's in the room. That camera's like I almost I was like uncomfortable with a camera in my face because I was used to being an actor on stage. And I think that, it's been interesting. From you, I've learned more about technical filmmaking, and it helps me to, once I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, my friend Oliver Thompson was really nice about letting me just stand on his set for Welcome to Happiness when he directed his full-length feature film. And I could stand behind him and just watch him direct these scenes, and I learned so much from doing that. And that was in 2014, and that's when I started to write and produce and direct my own stuff, because I like understood how to run a set. And but I think for me, starting in theater as an actor, and then eventually coaching actors and seeing some of the actors I had coached obtain some success and book roles. My background has always been about helping actors find their beats and the truth of the moment, and really listening to each other. And that's my area of expertise. So we've learned these different things from each other. And how do you? I guess the perfect director would be someone that's super technical and can also direct actors and can also do. But I don't think that every.
You only have so much time to do
that. Exactly. And I think nobody's good at everything. There's the things that I've been told before. Oh, you should edit your own stuff, and I'm like, I don't have the room in my brain to do that. I'm producing, directing, sometimes acting in my own stuff, and writing. I'd rather delegate that to somebody who's really talented in that department, and that's what my editor Matt Musinga does. So, yeah.
But it goes back into what you're saying. It's we don't have enough time to do everything in the world, like to do. It's like I would have loved to have taken a whole theater background just to kind of get in the idea, because I've always felt like there's no classes for film directors that's like, this is how you direct actors. Like, they don't really discuss that because it's so technical. You have to learn the technical aspects of it. I remember at Boulder, where I went to school in Colorado, that I always thought it was weird that the theater department and the film departments were so separated. And like, to the point that I heard stories that the dean of the theater school was like, they told the students, do not work with the film students, because the film students, you get some bad apples. We were talking about student films the other day. You get some really bad apples that just abuse like locations. They'll trash a place, and there's some students in the past that had like trashed the theater school, when they were filming, and ever since then, half the time film students, like, their films are terrible because they're casting their friends. And that's a big one. So
yeah, well, and we were just saying that today. I do think I'm stealing a line from one of my theater professors, Matt Hurley, and I were talking about him today. James DePaul, he was one of the best acting coaches the best acting coach I ever in LA that I ever worked with, and I remember him saying, I'm going to misquote him, but it was something like 90% of good directing is good casting. Yeah. And I agree with that. I thought, all right, I wrote this first draft of a short film, but look at the actors I've cast. Sure. As soon as, Matt and Marielle get their hands on this, we're going to come up with something that jumps off the page. And so I think a lot of it is about casting people that, is the casting appropriate? Do they have good chemistry with each other? Are they good listeners? And I love to cast theater actors in my films because I can tell when someone has a theater background. I can tell when an actor studied and comes from theater.
What specifically?
Yeah. Well, I could give an example of someone that I could tell right away had a theater background was when I saw Rachel McAdams in The Notebook. Right. And I was like, that girl has chops, and she's studied. And then I looked her up, and I was like, yeah, she has her bachelor's degree in theater, and you could just tell she's a great listener, and I could just tell she had training. I could just tell. And that's the same way I felt about Adam Driver.
Are there people out there that haven't had any training that you've watched and been like, oh, wow, that person's really figured out?
Of course. Yeah, there's so many. I feel like most actors that work in film
have started, like Leo. I know he grew up on film sets, but did he ever do any plays? I don't think so. Carrie Russell, this was her first play as far as I could. Well, as far as I've read, she hasn't done any Broadway plays other than Burn This, which we saw last night.
Well, she did other shows, but it might not be. This might be her first. Maybe it's her first Broadway play. I hope we're not saying a bunch of.
Mark and I have had a long-standing tradition of doing no homework before we record, and we make mistakes all the time. Trust me, our audience will call us out on it if we're wrong. But
well, the thing is like I had talked about Oliver's film, Welcome to Happiness. He cast Keegan-Michael Key.
Right.
All right, and a lot of people are fans of his, obviously. And I
love the guy.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to be. I think it was like I had a day where I was second AD or something. I was filling in on the day of his big scene, and he's from Detroit too, and I was wearing a Detroit hat, so he came over to me and wanted to talk about the Detroit Tigers, and we bonded over that, which was cool. But I watched the scene closely, and I said to him, do you have a theater background? Because you seem like you do. Like, I can tell by the way you work. And it was just that he was so professional, and he was so good with the director, and it was the way he would break down his beats and project, and he had a theatrical presence on set, and I could just tell, and he had an education in theater, and he was like, oh yeah, but it's like you kind of know your kind when you meet them or something. You're like, yeah, that person comes from theater, and they bring a certain kind of work ethic, because we're just used to doing it because you love it. You don't make any money, but yes, there's a lot of really great actors that didn't come from. Like, I might be misspeaking again, but Sean Penn is a phenomenal actor. I don't know if he came from theater, but he's a phenomenal actor.
It wouldn't surprise me if he's done some plays in his day.
I'm sure he has, and I'm sure if this is totally ignorant and I'm off, you have to erase that bit. But I think that it's just all about being willing to learn from other people who have different fields of expertise. It's interesting to see who studied film in school you studied film and I studied theater. In the past, you take with that, and I think if I had studied film, I would have been a much more technical person too, you know. And I maybe there's a chance I wouldn't know my instrument as well as an actor. Actually, I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't know my technique, and I would have just, it would have been a different path altogether.
One thing I've always wondered is like how an actor becomes an actor, because are some good actors just good actors because they are socially not awkward people? Like, are there people who are just, this person will always be a bad actor because they're basically a bad actor in real life? There's some people that I've always had the firm belief that every person on the planet has at least one character that they could nail.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. This is what I would say. I said this to this acting class I taught in Los Angeles. I said, who you are in life is who you are as an actor. And for me, personally, as an actor, for me, tapping into dramatic work or emotional work, it really comes from having, I would call myself almost hyper empathetic. Like I have my friend Devin, our friend Devin, has told me, Shayna, you have too much empathy, you know, because I'll like feel bad for everybody, you know, I'll absorb other people's feelings and take them on as my own. But I think that it starts with that, like a good actor is someone that has a tremendous amount of empathy so they can actually really imagine what it's like to be this character in this situation. And they can not only imagine it, they can feel it in their bones and their hearts and their guts. And you can't really teach that. You can. But if a person lacks empathy in their life and they're all one-note emotion and they don't really have empathy and they're kind of all about themselves, well, you're going to see that in their work. They're not going to have access to their emotions because they don't in life. They don't really, you know, if it's a person that only thinks about themselves and puts themselves first and doesn't have empathy for others, you're going to see a forced performance. That's sort of my theory. Like Carrie Russell, let's talk about her again for a second. She blew me away in Felicity because she is such an authentically emotional person, so appropriately emotional for that part. And J.J. Abrams wrote a great part for an 18-year-old female that chased her high school crush to college.
Right.
She's such a dork, and she does such a good job in that part. But she is, you see this on stage in Burn This too. She's a sincerely very emotional person. It's not something she's faking. You can tell if an actor is faking an emotion or if someone's fake crying.
Right.
Can't stand that. If you're not crying, just don't pretend you're crying because we can tell. Just be where you're at. So I think your question was, how does someone become an actor? I think it's different for everybody. Like, for me, I was 9 years old and I saw the movie My Girl and I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I think it's like when you get a pet, they say your pet chooses you. I think it's something that chooses you. And, you know, I mean, we're both still doing this. Like, I think it's just, like, we haven't decided to just stop. If it's part of your purpose, you just do it.
So if you're saying like sociopaths are not necessarily good actors, why do we have so many of them in Hollywood? Like, because I mean, there's so many actors that I could see, you know, they're so self-obsessed that they put on such a good act,
right?
Of creating a wall.
That's interesting. I mean, these are all really good questions. I think certain sociopathic personalities have mastered the art of imitating emotion. Like I can act like this, right? Like I can act as though I feel all this and I'm good at convincing people of this. But the majority of people I know that, like, when I think about people I've met along the way that have a certain personality type in their life, I'm not talking about like A-list actors that you see all the time. I'm talking about people I've met over the years. If they're having trouble accessing something in their work, it's happening in their life too. Like for me, I have too much empathy And that can be a thing I've had to manage in my life. Like, you can't go around feeling guilty all the time.
Right.
And, and you have to set boundaries for yourself. So I think that, you could be like a sociopathic personality and play a great characters that are in the realm of that skill set, but if you want to, I don't know. I don't want to ramble, but I mean, it's difficult to explain. But if you feel like a person is not authentically emotional in life, they're not going to be able to like turn that on. Like maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen it happen with these personalities and things that I've worked. Like I'm like, and they have trouble accessing their emotions on set too.
I'm trying to think of specific examples of people I would imagine to be sociopaths that. Usually, I mean, it kind of, you tend to get actors in Hollywood, like if they're mean or they're sociopaths, they typically disappear from public view entirely because people just get sick and tired of working with them eventually. It kind of goes slightly into another topic. The New York versus LA actor sort of thing. Like New York tends to draw artists who want to find and hone their craft, I feel like. Not to say that people in LA don't. I think that LA is more financially based or fame based. You've got actors who want to create a living and survive off of acting. You kind of need to be in LA. You can be in New York and get TV jobs, but as far as in the heyday of film, which isn't necessarily right now.
Yeah, it's all changing.
TV is huge, and the New York scene is huge right now for TV. But back in the day, obviously, LA was the hub, and it still is. It's just it's been spread out to Atlanta, Vancouver, Toronto, New York. Like it's all over the place now.
And the more that things are, everybody's creating their own web series or YouTube channels. Like location is actually becoming
a big thing,
irrelevant.
No,
I think you can produce something anywhere because you can stream it online, and it's like, all right, like I have these hopes. I'm holding my breath for Michigan to become a place that people film again, but there's a lot of talent there. I think, it's interesting. I chose LA over New York. I moved there in 2004.
Which is funny to me because I would imagine you would have chosen, especially you're more of an East Coast girl. Yeah. I would have assumed, given your love for theater, you would have come here. So why did you choose LA?
So many people have said that to me. I was an RA at Cal State Northridge in 2004, and one of my residents, I remember he was a guy named Day, and he was from New York, and he looked at me and he goes, "What are you doing here? You are such a New Yorker. Like, you belong in New York." And now I'm like in New York, and I'm like, yeah, I think I pretty much do belong here. It fits. But I think if I rewind my brain back that far, I was doing all this reading and studying. I was at Western Michigan University on a theater performance scholarship. And it was like, back in 2004, I read that if you want to do theater, you move to New York. If you want to do film and TV, you go to LA. It was like that black and white back then. And back then I was like, I've always wanted a career in film and television, so I'm going to go to LA. I want to go where films are made. Right. And so I went to LA, and I would get so excited anytime I would see a set, or I was like, oh my God, they were filming on my college campus. And you never see that kind of stuff in Michigan when I was growing up. So I wanted, I never knew I would become a filmmaker. I knew I wanted to be an actress. But I'm so glad I did go to LA because I did learn how to be a filmmaker. And my experience, you get the sweet and the sour everywhere you go. But what I loved about it, when I remember about first moving there, I went to Cal State Northridge, did a play, I did what I knew. And what I loved about it is that everybody, a lot of people had moved there from far away to pursue their dreams, and they were serious theater artists, and they were, the theater artists were making films too, and everybody was willing to hustle and help each other. And I think LA gets a bad rap, but I think that it is a city of people, that are working really hard, and you will find your niche and find your good group of people that that group feels like family. Like we have that. Like Chad and I have a group of friends we still talk to on a text thread, and we're all spread out throughout the country, and we met these people in college, or right after college, whatever. But I think that you kind of attract I don't know, like wherever you go, you know how they say wherever you go, there you are. You're gonna attract the kind of people that you want to be around, no matter what city you're in.
You're gonna weed out the people that you don't want to be around.
Yeah.
And ultimately.
And I think, I mean, any city can have, people like, I mean, I love where I'm from in Michigan, but even people that know where I'm from there will laugh at this. Like, some of the most entitled people are from the city that I'm from in Michigan. Like, it's like, oh man, like it's really anywhere. Like, there's good and bad people everywhere. And once you meet good friends that you can trust and that you want to collaborate with, then I think that's kind of the trick. But I think the whole LA versus New York thing it's kind of bull. It's just like, both cities are cool.
Versus.
Yeah.
I just mean in terms of the personalities that it attracts and
totally
what their goals are.
Yeah.
I think there used to be that narrative of New York versus LA. We had it the same in our film school. We had the students who graduated and went to LA, and you had the students that graduated and went to New York, and you could see it's in their personalities.
Yeah.
Just the kind of people they are, the kind of art they want to make. It's very. Long story short, let's bring this back around to
what we're doing.
What you're here to show me. This is the first for the podcast.
Yeah.
Because you've brought a television pilot.
Yeah.
That we've already talked about on this.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to Adam Driver and...
Yes, and Lena Dunham. I want Chad to watch the pilot episode of Girls.
I've never seen it.
Just because I think television has gotten really, really good over the last 15 years. I remember it used to be like either you're going to do film or you're doing TV. And growing up, watching TV was like, oh, it's the sitcom with the box laughter and it's not really high art or anything like that. And like now it's like since The Sopranos rolled out and all these great Netflix and HBO shows, and you're working on a great show. Are we allowed to say what show it is? Are we allowed?
Mr. Robot?
You're working on Mr. Robot. But I was so inspired by Lena Dunham, what she's done for women in film. Mm-hmm. She's a director, writer, actor, and
showrunner, basically, isn't she?
Yeah, and she is what I would describe as like unapologetically like super confident and just goes for it.
Right. Like
in a way that it's almost kind of male what she's doing. Like she's just like, and she's she doesn't weigh 100 pounds, and she's not this cliche idea of what your leading lady is supposed to be, and that can be really inspiring for women like me. Like she just doesn't give a shit. And she's written great roles for a lot of actors, and this was when I first saw Adam Driver was in this pilot. And what I love about this episode, should I talk about that yet?
Well, don't. I
don't want to give it away.
Yeah, don't spoil it for the audience yet. Usually they can listen to the trailer.
Okay.
I don't even know if there is a trailer for.
I don't know if there's
Girls.
a trailer. I don't think.
So I don't know if I'll figure that one out. Sometimes we'll play a scene.
Yeah.
But why don't we just watch it and we'll come back and talk about it.
Cool.
You are from New York, therefore you are just naturally interesting.
All I am asking for is $1,100 a month for the next 2 years.
That's insane.
My circumstances have changed and I can no longer afford to work for free.
When you get hungry enough, you're gonna figure it out.
Do you mean like physically hungry or like hungry for the job?
So I calculated, and I can last in New York for 3.5 more days, maybe 7 if I don't eat lunch.
Keep it up.
I'm not flattered by sexual harassment.
Why not? I love that stuff.
That's why I'm here, to jam a very specific frequency of feminine stupidity.
Thank you.
I've been dating someone who treats my heart like it's monkey meat.
What's up with your eyebrows? You look like a Mexican teenager.
Will you still have sex with me?
When it's appropriate. Sure.
I can't take you anymore. You think that everyone in the world is out to humiliate you.
You think because you're, 11 pounds overweight, you no struggle?
I am 13 pounds overweight, and it has been awful for me my whole life. Please stop the bike, Adam.
And it's like we're all slaves to this place that doesn't even really want us. could not pay me enough to be 24 again.
Well, they're not paying me at all.
Cheers, Shanna.
Cheers.
This is a tradition that Mark and I usually do, have a beer on the podcast.
Word.
I don't think in all the time that we've had our beer that we've ever been drunk on the podcast, but I don't know. I'm not drunk now, so.
Well, yeah.
So, all right, so we got through the episode.
Yep. Are we sure we're recording?
Yeah,
We're good?
Of course we are.
All right.
Wait, do I not look like a professional right now?
I just think that'd be terrible if we were sitting here talking for 30 minutes and we forgot to record.
Mark and I have done that before. And it was like one of the best podcasts of all time.
And then you're like, we weren't
We
recording.
were like 50 minutes into it, and we went, wait a minute. Oh, it's not recording. We're
that
like,
sucks. Fuck. Yeah.
The good thing I like about this sound recorder is it's got like 20 seconds of pre-record. Mm-hmm. So the moment you hit, it's always recording. So the moment you hit record,
Yeah.
it immediately adds those previous 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of recording. Anyway, girls.
Yes, we watched the pilot episode of Girls.
So before anything, what is it without spoiling the rest of the show? Because I've never seen it. Well, I've seen tidbits here and there when it was on.
Yeah.
Because this came out, the pilot came out in what?
2012.
2012? Was
Yeah.
it that? That doesn't seem that long ago to me, but then
And then
it's
it is.
7 years ago. But it lasted 6 seasons, 5 seasons?
Yes. I think it went to either late 2016 or 2017. It hit a good, solid, I think 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
And it was one of HBO's bigger shows.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of filled a niche that I guess what does HBO have now? I almost wonder that's kind of filled that void.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but
I don't know if it has.
I mean, okay, so what about it specifically? I know we talked a little bit about Lena Dunham. Mm-hmm. Who she directed Tiny Furniture? Or did she write
I've
it?
never seen Tiny Furniture, and I need to.
I haven't either.
I don't know. I know she wrote it for sure. I don't know if she directed it or not. I'd have to pull out my phone on Google, which I won't do right now. So, but she did write and direct the pilot episode, which I was really impressed with, and she created the series.
Was Tiny Furniture considered mumblecore? Did you ever hear that?
I don't know.
That term. There was all these movies in the mid 2000s that were, they called them mumblecore because you couldn't tell what the dialogue was half the time because the characters were mumbling. I don't know if that's too
I'm gonna go
specific
ahead
or
and
on the nose, but that's just.
Yeah.
I think Tiny Furniture, when I initially heard about it and I don't think I was aware of Lena Dunham at the time until Girls.
I'm going to take an educated guess and say that she would not do that because she would want people to hear her writing loud and clear.
Right.
Because her writing's too good. That's without having seen Tiny Furniture, but I could be wrong. But anyways.
I think it was a couple different filmmakers. It wasn't just her. It just fell into a niche genre. And
yeah.
Lord knows when you're making movies on your own, you don't necessarily have the budget to get a sound person. I don't know if I would assume they did back in those days. Not Girls, but in the indie filmmaking scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she caught Judd Apatow's attention that he wanted to produce Girls from what she had done. And should I talk about what I think of that episode first, or should you, or how do you want to?
This is your show. I mean, you
It's
brought
my
the
show.
episode. It's your job to introduce it to the rest of the world.
Okay, my job to introduce Girls.
I mean, I didn't know Judd Apatow was on it until we just saw the credits just now.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, seeing Girls for the first time, it's funny. I was in a theater company in LA, and I saw 2 actors put up a scene from the show. I think that's on episode 2 or 3. Might be episode 2. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, that's from Girls. That's from Girls. And I was like, I have never seen Girls. And this was 2012. So it drew me to want to watch the show. And that pilot, I think it's a really great pilot. I love some scenes more than others. The Becky Ann Baker plays the mother, Hannah's mother. Her parents are from Michigan. Of course, I'm going to relate to this. The father is great, and that opening scene where they cut her off financially, and Becky Ann Baker has the line, "We can't keep bankrolling your groovy lifestyle." I think there's just so much about this movie that this TV show I relate to personally. Being from Michigan, living in a big city, I remember that hardcore talk my mother gave me when I was around that age. Like, you know, I think she's 22 in the pilot, and you know, I got that talk like, you need to work hard, like you have to, if you want to stay in a big city, you need to bust your ass. And I remember taking that conversation so seriously, it turned me into a workaholic, you know, because I was like, I got to prove them wrong, and I got way too caught up in my bartending gigs and all that, because and then you forget the thing
stressful.
It's stressful, and you know, Hannah talks about it. It's about we've been talking about this my entire New York trip. You know, what do you do? Work a job where you make a bunch of money, or do you create art, or how do you do both at the same time? How do you strike a balance? And it's super challenging. And so I was just super impressed with her writing, her direction, her acting. She's super funny. And what I loved about her relationship with Adam Driver in the first scene, I think it's a television series that's incredibly unapologetically honest about sex in your early 20s, and how, you know, there's something I know it's not just me. There's a reason the show is successful. There is something about Adam Driver's behavior in that pilot episode, and the shit she is willing to put up with this guy that clearly has no respect for her, won't text her back, but she has this enormous crush on this guy, but he has all these vague things he says to her, like, okay, you know, she wants to know when she's going to see him again, and he says, just text me, and she writes really well for men. And the awkwardness of that sex scene where she's like incredibly self-conscious and stressed out and trying to vocalize her boundaries with him, and it's just real. And it's very, like, you could say, oh, we saw this in Sex and the City, but it wasn't as, they actually had nice apartments. And, you know, Adam, he's kind of living in shit. It's unfurnished. It doesn't look good. And she's willing to go over there and do this. And it just, their entire relationship, it's like she talks out loud about the things that most people just don't share, but it's like universal that, like, if you live life, you might have these experiences unless you get married right out of high school. So that was honest.
She's kind of like pulling back the covers on, like, you're right. Like, people talk to each other a certain way in reality. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Hollywood version of that. There's the super ultra processed version. Yeah. You have people who, and TV is so different because it's like you get usually you have this windmill of rotating writers that come in, and each one comes with very different backgrounds, very different everything, and so when you get 12 writers for 12 episodes, it kind of muddles down, and you suddenly lose those things. And if you have a singular writer like Lena Dunham, and I don't know if she wrote the rest of the season, but at least
she wrote a ton of them. Yeah,
she must have, at the very least, been such a integral showrunner. Yeah, like somebody who comes in and oversees something so specifically that they're able to keep their voice in the characters throughout whatever happens, despite however many writers you have. Yeah. That came through, especially in that opening scene that you're talking about, where she's sitting with the parents, and you can, just the way she's talking back and forth.
It's so realistic how people talk to the parents. And she chooses to open, she directed this episode and wrote it. She chooses to open her pilot, her introduction to the world of television, with her close-up of her face, mouthful of pasta hanging out of her face. And, she's hilarious. And I don't think people talk about how funny Lena Dunham's writing is enough. When I think Becky Ann Baker says, like, slow down, you guys are eating like someone's going to take it away from you. And she says, I'm a growing girl. She says, I'm a growing girl. She's really funny. And the other thing, the scene with Adam Driver, the other thing I want to say that I love is that Hannah, her character, Lena Dunham's character, she says out loud the things young women in their early 20s might be thinking during sex, but maybe they don't say it out loud, and she's talking too much, and then she's worried that she's talking too much. Then she starts to apologize to this jackass that she's dating or sleeping with. And I think that the narrative in film, TV, and maybe even theater is, I think there's something about where often they talk about how men are always worried, am I going to be good in bed? Am I going to be good at sex? That kind of thing. And they don't ever talk about how women worry about those same things. Right. And she talks about that. She's saying that out loud in that scene with Adam Driver, and both of them do a great job with a really very awkward scene. Right. And she's like, am I doing enough? Do you need me to do anything else? You know, and she's saying this, she's like, I don't know if I should move more. And it's like, she was brave enough to write this shit down, because these awkward moments in the beginning of your adulthood, they happen to everybody. But it's like Lena was brave enough to actually say this and put a camera to it. And I'm just so impressed by that. Like, I really feel like I became a better writer by watching this series, listening to some of the monologues, and it's really gratifying. I won't give anything away about the series, but it's gratifying to see this character whose self-esteem is essentially in the toilet in the beginning of the pilot. She eventually starts to kind of stick up for herself more and talk about the things that she needs from a relationship, or the boundaries, and like, what is she willing to put up with and not put up with. And, you know, that's if you choose to watch more, but it's cool to see her grow, because yeah.
Well, it's funny because I didn't see the lack of self-confidence in her character.
That's interesting.
You did. She didn't strike me as someone who was not self-confidence. If anything, when her parents kind of shut her off, yeah, she almost has like a blasé response to it.
Well, she's like, she always talks about her character as a narcissist. Like, she's like, what is wrong with you guys? Right. Like, well, I'm an only child. Like, yeah. I mean, like, yeah.
If people want to stop like funding your way through life, like, you kind of have to look in the mirror and go, well, they're kind of right.
Right.
You know, maybe I should figure out my own shit. But her response is so blasé, like, don't you? Yeah, what'd she say? I could have been a drug user. Like,
I could have been a drug dealer. You know, my friend just had 2 abortions, and like I think it's just really, she's very good at writing honest dialogue, and how you speak to your parents is not going to be how you speak to your peers. And she's like that only child that's 22 that's having a temper tantrum. She's like in denial.
Right, but she does it very like, she's not aggressive about it.
She looks at them like they're crazy. Like, this is crazy. You should keep supporting me. Yeah. Right. And that's where the funny is, because I mean, she just wrote a great scene for parents and their child that they need to cut the cord. And it's just, I love how uncomfortable the dad is. And I feel so terrible that I don't know the actor's name. I know him visually. Yeah. But he's so uncomfortable with the conflict. And the mom just like full on is like, our kid is spoiled.
He's not a very strong father figure.
Yeah. He's a pushover. He's super nice, and he doesn't want to, like, when she comes over to their house, he goes, I just don't like watching her struggle. Like, but there's, yeah, so
Adam Driver,
yeah.
I didn't think he was great in this episode.
Interesting.
The scene, maybe, I think as you see them more,
yeah,
I'm guessing throughout the series, like, obviously that develops however it develops, but his acting also, I mean, like you said, this is the first time you ever saw him.
The first time I ever saw him. What I loved about the character is that I felt like, wow, there's a TV show where someone's writing honestly about, I mean, I'm consciously not trying to sound sexist, but men of their early 20s, men at that age. Mm-hmm. And he's living in a big city, and he's an actor. I watched that episode and thought, they got it right. Like, you know, the fact that it might not appear that she has low self-confidence, but she puts up with this guy treating her like crap. Like, he is completely just using her for sex. They're not even friends. He even says to her, you know, they're talking about the tattoo she got and how she got tattoos because she gained a bunch of weight and she wanted to take control of her shape. And he says to her, well, you're not that fat anymore. Like, he actually says that. Like, he says horrible shit to her. And it's like,
you're not that fat anymore. You could have it lasered off.
Yeah. You're not that fat anymore. You know, like, and but it's like, it's hard to hear that stuff, but like, it's truthful. And it's like what women that, like, she's smart, she went to school, she's a writer, she's a great friend, but why is she willing to have a relationship like that?
Right.
And that's what sucked me into it, because a lot of really intelligent women compromise and date, like, are willing to put up with a lot of crap when they shouldn't. And especially in that age, in the early 20 phase of life, because you're trying to develop your confidence as a person and eventually command what you're worth, or so I think I just appreciated the brutal honesty of that scene. I have never seen anything like that ever before watching Girls. So,
well, I mean, that's what struck me about the episode, is how real the writing is in terms of it. Now, that's not to say like it's 100% real. Like, there's definitely some things in there that are kind of, it's like moments of like, this is funny.
Yeah.
But wouldn't necessarily happen in real life, in my idea. Like the opening scene, I don't think someone would actually respond that way without getting more violent in their response. But this is kind of who she is. Like,
who Hannah is. Like, she gets upset, but she just doesn't, like,
absolutely. When Allison Williams and Lena Dunham are in the bathroom together.
Yeah, in the shower.
In the shower.
And Hannah's eating a cupcake in the bathtub.
She's
an emotional eater, which I relate to. She's got to grab a cupcake all the time.
The way they're talking about Allison Williams' pseudo boyfriend is something I feel like I've heard many times in reality, but you don't really hear people. You don't hear characters written that way.
Yeah.
Where they're talking about like how he's basically a puppy dog and he's following her around. He clearly loves her, and Lena Dunham says, how does it feel to be loved that much, or something like that.
Yeah, and it's Charlie. And well, it's funny because I just realized when you're talking about that out loud, you talk about Adam and Charlie, these two different boyfriends or characters. They're the polar opposite of each other. This is also typical of women in their early 20s. You got the boyfriend that's loving her too much, respecting her too much. He's too nice, so she's not that into him, of course. And Hannah is dating a raging asshole, and she's super into him. So it's brutally honest about the circumstances. One thing I would say, to say something a little critical, the scene where they're high, they drink, I don't even think I'm saying this drug correctly, opioids.
Opium.
Yeah. Ray brings that into the apartment. When Jessa is in the bathroom, she's literally sitting on the toilet, and she has Marnie go in there and hand her a piece of toilet paper. I'm like, no, this doesn't happen. No, girls don't do that. Like, this is
maybe Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham, yeah. And I'm like, this is just.
I think there are some people, but.
Yeah, I'm just not one of those people. I'm like, close and lock the door. Like, do your business. Yeah, and that's where I'm like, you're pushing it. Like, I don't believe that this would happen. But
it's like locker room chat for women.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like it's a perfect episode. I feel like Jessa and Marnie they're finding their characters in that episode, and Lena's finding them. But I think what was well defined was the parents, Adam, and then to encourage people to watch it, the evolution of Charlie and Marnie's relationship is very interesting, and
I could see it being more true to life, because how many times have you seen that where somebody's more on board than someone else, and then they eventually come around.
Right. It's like, or they were too immature.
This is without me knowing where this is going, but if he's going to remain a character, that's where I would imagine it was going to go.
Well, there's an episode that blew my mind, and it was very emotional to watch. It's way later in the series. I'm conscious of not giving anything away, but it's called, I think they call it Panic in Central Park is the title of the episode. And it was kind of inspired from the film, I don't know who did Panic in Needle Park. I'm going to mix up Pacino and Robert De Niro, and I apologize, it's because I didn't see it. But it's inspired from that, and it's like they shot this scene this episode that's based on Marnie and Charlie years later after this pilot, and it's like a short film, and it's very heartbreaking, and it's really, really cool to see these characters evolve and to see how Lena evolved as a writer and a director. And it's but you see in a pilot characters trying to find themselves. But I think what's really clear to me is that, it's funny, at the end of the episode, Hannah says to her parents, I think I might be the voice of my generation, or a voice of a generation. And what's funny not only the way she delivers the line is funny, but it's true. She is a voice.
She became that
in her generation.
Girl,
she manifested it, and she went for it. You know, and I just had not, in 2012 when this came out, I had not seen a leading lady like Lena Dunham. Like if you are above a size 8 and you're a female actress or a female actor, whatever, you're like, okay, I'm going to play the fat, quirky friend. I'm going to play the friend next door. I'm going to do this. And Lena was like, well, how about I run the show and I'm the lead and I don't give a shit. I'm going to do nude scenes and all this. And her writing is great. And she gave a platform to real women. And I remember when I first moved to LA, I was, I think I was like a size 4. And I remember saying, I need to lose weight before I can take headshots. I said that to a director, and he was like, no, just take headshots. Because back in 2004, being like anorexic was like really the thing. And being someone in Michigan, seeing who was working in Hollywood, I really thought, I'm not even worthy of getting a headshot until I'm a size 2. It's fucking crazy. But this is the kind of stuff that goes through women's heads until you see leaders come forward like Mindy Kaling or Lena Dunham and writing their own material and creating their own content and she not only writes great roles for women, but for men. I mean, I haven't seen, like, you talk about how great Adam Driver is in that role, but she wrote the perfect part for this guy. He's awkward. He's an asshole. He doesn't seem like he's acting. He seems like just this real strange character she met, and she's just into it. And like, you know, like it just, she gave him a platform. I mean, I don't know what he did before Girls. You know, she wrote that part and cast him.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Like, I had never seen him until recently, really.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, outside of Star Wars, what I saw him in first, but I mean, the whole cast as a whole, like, I don't know if there's any one of them that I really recognized prior to this. Maybe
me either.
Like,
Me either.
I feel like this was like the start for most of them.
Well, and I said we were talking about theater actors before we watched this, and Becky Ann Baker, and I need to Google who the husband is because he's phenomenal. I said to you during the show, these two have a background in theater. They're two New York actors. I know Becky Ann Baker had a very small part on Sex and the City. She plays Miranda.
I recognize her.
Yeah, she plays Miranda's older sister, and she makes like an appearance when Miranda's mother dies in Sex and the City, and Becky Ann Baker is like one of my dream actresses to work with. Like, I would love to work with her because she's such a great listener, and she's real. She really like reminds me of a Midwest mother in that show, and she's just as funny as Lena Dunham, and it gets even funnier in one of the episodes where Hannah goes back to Michigan, and you know, it's just it's I think what's so relatable is the overall theme about being from somewhere else, moving to a huge city, and trying to pursue a career in the arts, and that's what Hannah's doing as a writer.
When you have to put up the most amount of rent.
Yeah, and I mean, Zoe Mamet's character says that like $2,100 a month, amaze, like that was a deal back in 2012, and now that probably does sound relatively cheap or something to New Yorkers now. Or like,
Yeah, it does.
You're like, oh, that's cheaper. But yeah. So I mean, when you watched it, did you watch that pilot and think, I want to watch more, or I'm never watching the show again?
I think, yeah, no, I do want to watch more. I think the reason I never watched it is usually I'm drawn to things where I understand what the plot's going to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily true either, but it was always something I wanted to see. There was just always something I wanted to see more.
Yeah.
And just now when I can barely see anything, it's like TV, like we were talking about before, is in such a golden age.
Yeah.
Where there's so much good quality content out there, and
Yeah.
more than half my time is spent working on some.
Yeah.
It's like I just never got into it for that reason. I almost started watching it when it first came out, and then usually if I don't see something right away, I don't ever get into watching it.
Yeah.
But that said, like the whole first scene is a perfect setup for this kind of story. To me, you were saying like Sex and the City is like very different.
Yeah. And I love Sex and the City. Don't
But
get
I
me
could
wrong.
see these characters eventually 20 years from now being those characters maybe. But that's just from seeing the first episode, I could see them evolving into more successful.
I think with Sex and the City, even, you know, Carrie being a writer and she had a decent little apartment, and there's something always glamorous about it. Like,
Way
she's got a shoe fetish, and this woman can barely make her rent, yet she's spending $40,000 on shoes. Like, seriously. I don't want to bash Sex and the City because I really did love that and watched it religiously, and I've watched every episode multiple times and can quote that show. Yeah. Which is another thing that's funny with Zoe Mamet's character. She meets her cousin Jessa, comes to stay with her, and she's saying you're like a Samantha, or you're like a Carrie with Charlotte hair, and that's a really good combination. And you know, like, this kind of stuff gets said. Like, that's why it's funny because it's true. But I think what I like about Girls is immediately in the pilot, it's talking about how hard it is to even survive in one of these cities. And the same can apply for LA. People say LA can be easier than New York. I've never lived in New York, but I remember feeling that in LA. Like, you have to bust your ass. There was a time where I would open one bar and close another as a bartender in my early 20s and work 7 days a week and never get a day off, just to pay for my Studio City apartment. And that's what Hannah says in this episode. When her parents cut her off, like, I could survive. I did my math, like 3 more days in New York.
7 if I don't eat.
Yeah. If I don't eat, and, you know, but it's, if you've lived in a big city and moved away from home, you relate to this stuff. That, like, are you going to do this? Are you going to live this life? Or are you going to pack up and go home? And it's funny to have this, you know, conversation and podcast with Chad, because we both did this. You were
I'm
from
right here, Shannon.
You
don't have to refer to me as if I'm not.
Well, okay. I've never done a podcast before, but like, you moved from Colorado, right? Like, you moved to LA from Colorado, and you're in New York right now, but you're technically still living there. How many years has it been?
2003. I moved to LA.
So you moved there a year before me.
I moved there without any friends there. I mean, I had family that lived like an hour and a half south of LA, but that, you know.
Yeah.
When I got there, I stayed at my grandma's place down in Orange County, which was...
So you have some family in SoCal.
An hour and a half drive up to LA just to do anything, but unless there was traffic, and then it became 3 hours.
Yep. And you're still there in 2019.
I've been there long enough that Colorado has changed so much that when I go back, I'm like, this is, you know, to use the Garden State quote, like, this is not my home anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's changed so much. Pot's been legalized. The population's totally
in
different.
Michigan too.
Rent is double what it was at the time.
Yeah, going back to Michigan, I was like, the rent here is legit expensive. Like, what the heck? Like, but yeah, so I moved there in 2004, and I'm still back and forth all the time now, but I was there until 2017, so that's, almost 15 years. But you and I watched so many of our friends leave.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason we've stayed in touch, because it's like, okay, when the older you get, you're like, you have to keep talking to the people that are still pursuing this. Because it's like, you see a lot of, like, some of my friends are still there, but at a certain point, people, they get exhausted and do want to just live life and not
you have to be
constantly
crazy
bored.
enough to go through with it and basically just realize that you can't do anything else.
Right.
At some point.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting to me that Lena Dunham chose to play. I'm thinking, as a woman from Michigan, what possessed this woman or not possessed, but what made her want to play a character that's from Michigan that moved to New York? Because Lena Dunham is from New York. Her parents, I think her mother is a successful artist. She did not have...
So you don't think she had to go through what
her
character had to go through?
Absolutely not. Like, she doesn't have that narrative at all. So, but it's funny, though, as a person from the Midwest, as a person from Michigan, to see her do this pilot and execute this. Somehow she got this right. Like, it's not even, even the kind of dialogue she has with her parents when she goes back home to Michigan and how she feels at home. It's so familiar. Like, I get it. You feel... There's something about when you go home to the house you grew up in, you revert back to being this child. And, in later episodes, she's got the old poster she had on her walls from high school. And, like, You know, her mom's trying to convince her to come home and maybe work at Michigan State. And this is the kind of conversations I would have every time I would come home from LA. Like, oh, you should move back. When are you going to move back? When are you going to move back? And, you know.
I never got that from my parents. They wanted me to stay away. I'm like, no, you do your thing.
No, you're good. Bye. I was just talking about how weird it is I feel like Lena Dunham got it right, that she depicts what it's like to move away from the Midwest to a big, overwhelming city and to try to pursue a dream. And I love the last moment of the pilot where I feel like so much of that episode is so well done. She wakes up in her parents' really nice hotel room bed by herself. Yeah. She tries to order room service and she can't. They've cut her off. And then she proceeds to steal the housekeeper's tip because she's out of money. She takes the $20 out of there. And then she goes down the street and I think he's supposed to be a homeless man, says, "Does your heart hurt? Girl, when I look at you, I want to say, hello, New York." And it just it sets the tone for what ride you're about to go on. Yeah. She captures the essence of this city and how nuts, but how great it is. You know, it's just but you have to be... You're like, okay, she's been cut off financially. What is this girl going to do? You want to know. Right. Is she going to do it? And I love when she's...
Are you rooting for her?
Oh, yeah. Totally rooting for her. So I identify her with her.
Steals money from her.
She's
tips.
Desperate.
She's stealing money from the tips.
She probably has a negative bank account. I'm rooting for her because, I want to see her.
What is it? She doesn't... There's no, she's not being condescending towards, the Midwest. I feel like most writers would, especially if they had grown up in New York, might.
Yeah.
Kind of like most New Yorkers I've met. I remember when I first started coming out here, some of the first people I met, I said I was in Colorado, and they did not know where it was on the map.
Really?
Yeah, and they were like, "Is that Dusty Cowtown? Did you grow up on a farm?" And I was like,
Here in New York, they said that to you?
In New York. And a lot of that, I guess
I love Colorado. I think
people might write that into their writing, but the fact that she doesn't is good.
She does in later episodes. There's a great...
Everybody kind of talks down about their
she says something super funny in one episode where she's talking to these people that want to publish some of her work, and she's like, "Well, I'm from Michigan, so I'm always 10 to 20 pounds overweight," and but it's I don't take that personally. I think it's funny because you notice the difference in your menu options, even going from LA to Michigan. Yeah. You're okay, everything
right.
You I have been given people have looked at me sideways and they want to punch me if I ask them if they have almond milk instead of whole milk out there. What the F is that? Or do you have vegetarian bacon? Absolutely not. Get over yourself.
Yeah, take a road trip through America and suddenly it's your options is diner food.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just saying I don't know how she got that. You know what? I feel I could be wrong on my facts here, but I think Lena went to Oberlin College, which is Oberlin College in Ohio. I think it is. So I think she had a Midwest experience in college. And again, we can Google and say I'm wrong or whatever later. But I think I'm trying to, right now thinking out loud on my toes here, going, how does she get the Midwest right? And I think it's because she chose to go to college at Oberlin. If she did her character actually went to Oberlin. Yeah, so she had this Midwest experience. And if I'm incorrect, I'm incorrect. But I think that she drew
Don't worry,
drew
our
from
audience will correct us.
They'll be like, that woman doesn't know what she's talking about. But I just think she was honest about women in their 20s and relationships in your 20s and different individual struggles. And I ended that episode wanting to know more, ended up watching the whole series. And I think, I think through watching her work and watching that show, it was almost felt productive watching TV. I started writing monologues and writing and directing monologues and filming them. And I would just watch these episodes and think, this girl's just telling the truth.
Yeah.
She's just saying it from her perspective, and her perspective's okay, and her voice is valid, and she's not apologizing for it. And I think that if I could ever meet her, I'd thank her for that, because I think that women are used to I used to say sorry a lot. I don't know if I still do this.
Yeah.
Do I say that? I apologize a lot. Like, I'm sorry, but
yeah.
sorry. Yeah, and I've had people say before, like, you don't have to apologize before every sentence that comes out of your mouth. And it might be, you know, something subconscious that I think a lot of people, or I don't know if it's just, if it's predominantly women or people in general, feel like they have to apologize for taking up space or something. Like, oh, I'm sorry that I
think that has a lot to do with personality, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I say it all the time.
Yeah.
And some people don't.
And I think Lena Dunham's one of those people that doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think she's like, I'm sorry for my narrative. I think she just bulldozed with confidence, was like, I am going to be the voice of a generation, and I'm going to write this thing. And I'm sure Judd Apatow saw that confidence. And there's also that vulnerability. And I don't know. I think she's great. Like, I mean,
it's the confidence of just stepping forward and being like, this is what I want to say, this is my story, and not,
and she changed casting,
doubting it.
Yeah, for women like her, and I'm gonna say Mindy Kaling did it too, but we're not talking about Mindy right now. But you know, like I said, there's been these cookie cutout cliches that people put, especially not just women, female actors, but all actors, like, oh, you're gonna be a character actor, you're gonna play this kind of role, or you're going to be the funny guy or the funny girl, or you're going to be this. And it's like, how about we erase all that bullshit and just cast really good actors and people that listen to each other and are good to work with, and like, you know, polite on set and good people. And, you know, I mean, I think, I don't know, I just feel like she kind of changed
just the landscape.
She changed the landscape of the industry. Yeah. I really think that. She's got haters. I mean, people are going to say what they want, but if you have no haters, you have no game. I always say that.
If you're not ruffling feathers, I do believe that you're not really.
You're not doing anything.
I mean, you. I think we were talking about this earlier at lunch. Like, the people who are afraid to say what they want because they're afraid of how it's going to be perceived. And
yeah.
I feel like. I think Mark and I might have talked about this, but all our student films, like, I took everything down. Like, I didn't want it out there in the world anymore. I'm proud of some of it, but it's like, it's kind of like the writing, like, technically it's not great. Like, the writing's not great, but there's creativity in that. And there's some creativity in, like, older things you do.
Totally.
As an artist, that you mute. You hit the mute button on your life. You hit your mute button on being creative because you're like, well, this is kind of awkward, makes me feel weird. It's a little strange. You know, a lot of my old short films were a little perverse in a weird way, but I don't think I was aware of it at the time. And then you put it out there in the public, and it's like, I go back and watch, like, things like I did in college, and I'm like, wow, this is very, very creative, but, like, technically it's not perfect, so you end up muting it. And, like, for someone to come out and, like you said, for her to be brave, to be able to come out and show these scenes where her character's getting basically degraded by a guy who doesn't care about her.
Right.
And, you know, but that's also attaching, like, her personally to that character. Like we're saying that she experienced these things in real life. We don't know that she did. I'm sure she probably has, but we don't know that she has experienced those things, but she's certainly written them for her own character, so it's like you kind of just assume, you kind of tie Lena to the character.
Yeah, and for her to be able to not only write that scene for her and Adam, their first scene in the show together, their first sex scene together, write it, direct it, and act in it, and it's kind of, you're, as an audience member, I'm thinking, oh, okay, what is this awkward scene? Like, this is a scene I would never want to watch with my mother, right? Like, this is just horribly kind of, it's not a beautiful love scene from the rom-coms from the 90s we grew up. It's it's like super awkward and kind of gross, and like what he's...
Some more realistic.
Yeah. And the fact that she managed to not only make it real, but it's funny. Yeah. She manages to find the humor in it, so it's not just like, oh, we're watching a brutal scene. Like, this is very disgusting and hard to get through, which can be a different thing altogether, but she finds the humor in it. And I think that's not an easy thing to do. to act right and direct that at the same time, and to find those beats and to find the humor. And in casting Adam Driver, she found someone very willing to jump in with her, and I think
that's very brave on top of that. Like,
both of them, yeah. Like,
do you want to play a dick and just run around naked and
have this extremely
weird sex scene
physically awkward sex scene, and he owns it. And I feel like they were each other's equals in this series because he's willing to get ugly with her. And even the dialogue where she says, "I like you so much, I don't know where you disappeared to," because he obviously flakes on her all the time, doesn't answer her texts. And he says, "What are you talking about? I'm right here." And that's so truthful that sometimes in these relationships, like those early 20s relationships I'm talking about, young men can convince the woman, "You're just crazy. You're just being a crazy girl." But he's totally flaking on her, you know, and he's mind fucking her, for lack of a less crass way to say that. But it's very real, and she is a fantastic writer in that sense, that she finds ways to like have very real dialogue. We had an in-depth discussion about dialogue today at our table read. Like, when do you say too much? When can we just play with the moments of silence? And I feel like she's saying just enough in those, even in the small talk, where they're kind of they're not having sex yet, but there's foreplay. And she's like, "You know that part on your resume where you have to write special skills, like ice skating?" And he just says to her, "I don't know, I haven't applied for a job in a long time." Like, that's, it's just like she's awkwardly small talking to him. But it's also, she's weaving in how hard it is to find a job. We didn't talk about that scene where she gets like essentially let go from her internship because she wants to be paid.
And they're like, "Well,
see you later.
Nice working here." Yeah, see you.
And I just think that that's realistic too. The in between jobs, like that panic button you hit when you're in a big competitive city and you're like, "What am I gonna do?" Like, I'm in this pool of people and I have to fine tune my damn resume. And is my degree worth anything? Am I gonna get a job with an English degree? They talk about that too in the scene with her and Adam. It's very relatable.
Well, Shayna, I'm gonna check it out. We'll get back to you in 3 years when I'm done with the whole series. but
he's only saying that because you work 18-hour days.
I always wanted to see it. Well, plus I'm in the middle of the OA right now.
Oh, that's right.
And Game of Thrones.
I should have to watch the OA pilot with you and see what I think.
The Kerry Russell show, The Americans. And everything else. But what's, as a whole, as far as TV shows that you've watched, where does Girls fall in the lexicon of ranking? Because I know you just recently revisited Dawson's Creek.
Yes, I did. Well, I appreciated different podcasts. I appreciated Dawson's Creek more as an adult than I did as a high school student.
And you related to Dawson.
I related to Dawson because he's a filmmaker. Yeah, and he's obsessed with it. And different place in my head when I was 15. But yeah, I would put, My So-Called Life as my number one love. That was my show.
Something you pointed out to me was only one season long.
One season long, yeah, but it had an impact. That's why people think
as impactful as it was at the time.
Shout out to Winnie Holzman. I had the honor of meeting her.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so My So-Called Life is number one. Girls is somewhere on there. I don't know where it is. I don't know if I can. But in terms of dramas and it's maybe it's number 3. I don't know what comes. I don't know what number 2 is. But it definitely is a show I've been able to watch. Like, sometimes I'll just play it in the background when I'm doing things at my house or whatever. It's just like I definitely have favorite episodes. I love some more than others, but it was I don't know. I just think it's a fun show. It's not for everybody, but I dug it. But yeah, thanks for having me, Chad.
Sure, no problem. We'll see you around.
See you later.
It's Dragon Wagon.
Gamebox Monthly sends a new awesome indie tabletop game right to your door every month. There are multiple subscriptions to choose from, and you can personalize them to fit your style. Also, you're guaranteed to never get a title you already have, letting you focus on what matters most, having a great time with great people.
So visit GameboxMonthly.com and use the promo code DRAGON to get an exclusive discount just for the Hell With This listeners.
Once again, that's GameboxMonthly.com.
Rediscover social.